How many of you, if you were never exposed to sin, do you think would commit sin in their lives? If you were never exposed to it, didn't know what it was, how many of you would commit a sin? How many? Anybody? The truth is, if it's not in your upbringing, right, if it's not acceptable by the society around you, you probably won't do it. You won't do it. That's just like there were things I was not exposed to as a child, so they were foreign to me, so foreign that the act of committing it jarred my entire system. Why? Because it wasn't something that was incorporated into my upbringing. It wasn't. That's just like drugs, right? All the time I was in school, drugs were not a problem. They weren't. So no one was ever hooked on things where I was. They weren't hooked on things. They didn't tamper with them or anything else. So it was a no-brainer. So the first time I was exposed to the drug problem, right? While I was in the Army, I was exposed to a drug problem. And it was something I could not, I was thinking to myself, how can a person do this? You know, why don't they just cut it out? I had no experience, mind you. That's what I was thinking. But once you taste of it, it's a different story. In other words, if you begin and these things are not in your environment, they're going to be so foreign to you that they won't pop into your mind. And if they don't pop into your mind, how then can you do anything? But if you were knowledgeable about a drug problem with everybody, if you were knowledgeable of the ins and outs of how they're dealt and all this other stuff, that's going to be a temptation in your life. Certainly if you know it can relieve stress and this, that, and the other, that's going to be a temptation. Why? Because you have knowledge of it. It becomes part of your world. And what I'm telling you is this: if something is not a part of your world, how then can you act on it? You would be blissful concerning certain things, right? So what happens to a person who looks in every single subject? I'll tell you, somebody who searches very deep things of, whatever the subject is, they go headfirst into it. What happens in that case is that person has to deal with a lot of temptation, don't they? Huh? A lot of it. Before all of you lost your virginity, you saw that act as one thing. But once your virginity was lost, it became a craving. See the difference? Before it was just innocent thoughts, right? You with your hormones were cutting up. But after the fact, because you had deep knowledge of it, experience with it, it became a craving. Something you had to fight. You didn't have to fight it at one stage in your life because it wasn't important. You only fight something that you're familiar with. Otherwise, being in that blissful state, the Lord compensates for that, for your sakes. Isn't that awesome? Truth is, we know a lot. We immerse ourselves into a lot, and a lot of things have become part of our world. And so right now, as I'm speaking to you, we have lots of points of temptation. We do. Because we have all these points of temptation, it's important that we do not move away from Christ. Because in the moment we do, we're going to fall prey to those temptations. You will. I've already described to you guys part of the act of fulfillment of the body and what it craves after. You can have moments when you're just sitting there and all of a sudden a craving for some sinful act hits you, right? You have a craving for it and you can fight it all day. Then once you give in to it and once you immerse yourself into it, and then you come out on the other side. It zaps you of spiritual life. How many have found that out? It's like once you do it and get it out of your system, you're zapped. Your spiritual life is zapped. It's almost like you start from square one. How many know that? And then you think to yourself, why did I do it? And you feel disgusted with yourself and everything else. But it should give you an idea of how strong your flesh desires can be. Right? That means your flesh has some very strong desires. Now listen to this. Because of the spillage taking place right now, the spillage would be mankind is making room for those things in the spiritual realm to occupy this realm. Right? They have this power where they can truly present something to you to cause you to be very lustful over it. And if we have problems fighting our flesh over these small things that we have to get out of our systems, only to find out it causes condemnation of self. If we have an issue with that, how in the world can we withstand something that's a billion times more powerful and influential? The truth is, without Christ, there is no escaping that. Without Christ, you don't have enough resolve. Without Christ, there's no way out. Just like the day you were drawn in to commit a sin, you felt disgusting afterward and felt like you were spiritually zapped. What do you think is going to happen when that temptation, that desire, is right in front of your face? The spiritual tug you feel is real. How do you think we'll fare with that? See, when it's in your head, you can say to yourself, well, it's not real. Let me take that captive. I'm not going to do that. The phone could ring and totally throw you off. All of a sudden, you're not concerned about that anymore. What I'm talking about is, what if the vessel of Satan himself approached you face to face, of whom is encapsulated all darkness, all dark desires, right? Acts of unrighteousness, plots and schemes. What if he was standing right before you? The Bible teaches us a man is drawn away and tempted of his own lust. If Satan were to stand before you, he would draw out of you or make come to the surface everything of him. Everything of him. Satan is full of rage. And what do you see in the world right now? What do you see? You see rage, don't you? You can flip the television on and track the footprints of Satan walking all throughout the earth, because he leaves in his wake destruction, death, anger, deep depression and sorrow, bitterness, hopelessness, murder. He consumes whatever he touches. He does. And there are too many people, right? Too many people. It wouldn't be so bad if it were the people outside of the faith. No, we're talking about people inside the faith. So what weakness do we have in this regard? And what in the world are we actually contending with? Well, let's discuss that. Let's see where they are. We're talking about doorways. Doorways that humanity can open. Those doorways, right? Through desires. Let me give you an example of something. Suppose you're an artist and you have a passion for art, but you don't draw very well. And all your life, you have tried and tried and tried, and nothing comes out right. But you never give up. And one of your heart's cries would be, I wish the Lord would grant me the hands to draw what I see, right? If that person should die not fulfilling that, do you know what happens to their kids? Anybody? You guys know what happens to their children? Their children are born not only with that trait, but with an ability to go much further than the parent. Do you guys remember the Lord explained that he gave man, now you have to read 3 different parts of the Bible to get this, but when he made a woman for mankind, he did so that the man could perpetuate himself by way of children. In other words, he could, whatever he established would be carried on by his children. Here's what's so funny. Most of these folks, when we read in the Bible, they knew who their sons were. But all too often, the sons were in a different path with them, and then they knew, some of them knew who their grandchildren, who they were. But they did not share with him, right? These internal things that we do have. The Lord gave explanation. He didn't make us eternal because it was for man to strive in this earth, that they may learn piece by piece to build things, to do things, right? And when you have a child, all of what you can do, but with a passion with it, that child is born with a mastery. Where you left off is where they begin to take it much further. Do you know that? That's in all families. You can see that in all families. And it's almost undeniable. Undeniable. Yet, it's almost like people ignore it, don't they? They ignore that. That small little thing that demonstrates to us a process of fulfillment that the Lord has set in motion. Through your children's children, accomplishment may be made. That's why in the Bible it says we have entered into another man's labor when it speaks in regard to the gospel. We didn't establish, right, all this stuff in the gospel, but we surely do enter into what somebody else labored for. Suppose somebody fought tooth and nail as they ministered all throughout a neighborhood. Now, nobody followed them at first. Nobody heard them at first. But one person heard them and thought it was wonderful. Then 2 people heard them, thought it was great. 3 people, right? So on and so forth. So you have all these individuals who now have heard the one person. They heard him. They were shut down at first. They heard him. This guy's in the field. The laborers are few. He's in the field working. But suppose his time is up. He brings them to a recognition they need Christ, and then his time is up. So what happens? In his children's line, a work is to be completed. So his children step up to the plate, having everything he had, plus they have more, and they finish the work. And if that person should fall, the work continues through more generations. This is what the Lord has set up for us. You have desires to do things, but you don't have time to fulfill them. You see that? Now, it doesn't matter if they're adopted or not. I can tell you that right now. I've seen adopted children take on the traits of the deceased grandfather of families. They didn't know the grandfather. Yet these adopted children act just like the grandfather that they did not know. And that happens more often than not. Strangest thing to see, to behold, when you see someone who did not know somebody in their past, but they act just like them. Mm-hmm. Just like them. The Lord knew what he was doing. Then we get up to our time. How many people in your past do you think pray to be released from the oppression in this place? We all know that slaves did it, didn't they? But they had children. And the more children they had, given the generations, the more incorporated those once slaved people become with society. But it takes more than one generation. It takes a few. Do you all see that? So that means there's a principle at play that we ought to pay attention to. That means Satan would utilize this same principle to corrupt people. So getting rid of one person, as it turns out, is not solving the problem. Not at all. The Lord does a masterful work in doing this and preserving you at the same time. But you had to come. And I want you to see how many things in your life had to be set up for you to get here in the first place. You are, in fact, a supernatural birth. You are. Supernatural, you are. I ask you this, though. For what reason? Why? Why? For what reason? You're the preserved generation that'll be in a time when people's faith, well, it's going to seemingly fail. What's going to cause it to fail? Because those that came before you, they wanted the truth, didn't they? Lord, give me the truth. Some of you are out there, you're saying, I want the truth. I want to know what this is, and I want to know what that is. What is the truth behind this or that? That's what we say, right? We're that generation of which many sowed into. We are the product of many hopes and dreams. We have to establish that so that you understand who you are. You are the product of somebody else's prayer. Your belief in Christ is a seal. It is a seal upon you. And you were always meant to go through what I would term the Lord's crucible. Always. A set of tests, right? To see if you will serve or not. In any given situation. And why is all this important? It is true, mankind has no idea what they're about to face. It'll look like all the dimensional gateways will open up at once and creatures will come pouring in. Things that people are going to have to contend with. But with Christ, you're a victor. You'll overcome with Christ. Without Christ, you're dead already. Because those things that found a home in you, they don't want to lose you as a home. They're going to fight tooth and nail to keep it. They don't care what they have to do, but they'll do it to keep it. Having said all that, I need to emphasize the difference of the time approaching. Some of the stories you have heard, some of the stories left out. Most importantly, to give you an idea of what it was in the days of Noah as it was recorded by those who experienced the flood. They experienced the flood. They saw the storm clouds. They saw the giants. They beheld the monsters. The same ones we see today. They're descriptions of what they saw. Big black dogs with glowing red eyes. Big ape-looking men with yellowish glowing eyes. Isn't that something? We have to go over that. Once you identify these things, once you know about these things, your identification of such will take off through the roof.